Ukraine says Russia has delivered 80,000 troops to the border. Russia's recent buildup of 80,000 troops on its eastern border with Ukraine and in Crimea has put the international community on high alert. There are widespread concerns about Moscow's intentions and a possible threat of war. Technically, Ukraine and Russia have been engaged in a conflict since 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and backed separatist forces in Ukraine's eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, collectively Donbas. The ongoing hostilities in the region have largely faded from the international headlines in recent years. But the latest aggravation in the security situation serves as an important reminder that the conflict is far from over. In fact, given the strategic importance of Ukraine to Russia, any solution to the crisis remains very distant. A combination of several possible factors is likely to explain why we are seeing this intensification in regional tensions now and why Russia might be seeking to escalate the conflict in Ukraine. First, following the election of Joe Biden as U.S. President, the deterioration in relations between Moscow and Washington was expected, with an intensification of hostilities in eastern Ukraine being one way in which Russia was likely to project its dominance. Second, there has been a recent intensification of discussions about Ukraine accelerating its membership in NATO. While this is highly unlikely for the foreseeable future, Ukraine joining the Western Alliance has always been categorically opposed in Moscow. Third, in February, Ukraine's President, Volodymyr Zelensky, stepped up efforts aimed at curtailing the influence of pro-Russia political and oligarchic forces in Ukraine, as demonstrated by the sanctioning of Russian President Vladimir Putin's close friend and one of Ukraine's opposition leaders, Viktor Medvedchuk. Fourth, so far, Moscow has failed to resolve the enduring water and security issues in Crimea, which it pledged to address by the summer of 2021, after Kiev cut off water supplies to the peninsula. This continues to result in very high costs for Moscow, with some estimates suggesting that the occupation of Crimea cost Russia about $23 billion (16.7 billion pounds) during the first 5 years. As such, the recent military buildup could be a way to pressure Kiev on the issue. Fifth, Turkey has also recently increased its support for Ukraine and condemned Russia's aggression during a meeting between Zelensky and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on April 12. Russia has reportedly expressed concerns over the presence of Turkish drones in the Donbas. This issue is likely to be especially contentious given that Russia-Turkey relations came under severe strain after Turkey offered strong backing to Azerbaijan during last year's war with Armenia over the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. Russia perceived this as an intrusion on its regional sphere of influence. But despite this intensification in regional tensions, the risk of a military confrontation between the two countries or an outright Russian invasion of Ukraine currently remain relatively unlikely. There are several reasons for this. There is a precedent for Putin using foreign policy adventurism to boost his approval ratings, annexation of Crimea in 2014, for example. But the potential economic costs that such an intervention would bring are likely to be too great, especially ahead of the crucial State Duma lower house elections in September 2021. President Vladimir Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said moving troops across Russian territory was an internal affair. Some of the troops, including units in Crimea, have been on exercises. But Mr. Peskov also accused Ukraine of staging provocations. Ukrainian intelligence sources told the BBC that the extra forces amount to 16 battalion tactical groups, which would be up to 14,000 soldiers. In total, according to the Ukrainian presidency, Russia now has about 40,000 on the eastern border and about 40,000 in Crimea. Since the collapse of communism in 1991, Russian troops have intervened in conflicts in several areas of the former Soviet Union, notably in Chechnya and other parts of the Caucasus. In April 2014, just after Russia's annexation of Crimea, pro-Russian separatists seized a large swath of eastern Ukraine's Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Earlier, months of pro-Western demonstrations in Ukraine's capital Kyiv had forced out a pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych. Russia's use of special forces, cyber warfare and propaganda in this and other conflicts is known as hybrid warfare, not a hot war, but not a frozen conflict either. A U.S. special report for Congress last year highlighted the role of the GRU, Russia's military intelligence agency. There was large-scale combat in 2014, before a ceasefire in 2015. There have been some prisoner exchanges since then. More than 13,000 people have been killed in the conflict. Ukraine says 26 of its troops have died in Donbas so far this year, compared to 15 all of 2020. The separatists say more than 20 of theirs have died this year. In previous conflicts in what it calls its near abroad, Russia has sent in troops as peacekeepers, who have ended up staying. It happened in Moldova and South Ossetia, for example. James Scher says it can well happen again in Ukraine. It would freeze the position firmly in Russia's favor. Some speculate that Mr. Putin also wants to test U.S. President Joe Biden, who has taken a tougher stance on Russia than his predecessor, Donald Trump, hadn't by treaty, as Ukraine is not a member. But NATO has close ties with Ukraine, which has received the Western arms including U.S. Javelin anti-tank missiles. So Russia knows that it risks provoking more Western military help for Ukraine. President Zelensky has urged NATO to speed up Ukrainian membership. But the conflict makes it difficult for NATO to accept Ukraine under the 30-nation alliance's current terms. NATO's Jens Stoltenberg said it's for the 30 members to decide when Ukraine is ready for NATO membership. But he stressed Ukraine's special partnership with NATO now, which a few other countries also have, including Sweden, Finland and Georgia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Thursday accused Moscow of building up troops on his country's border as the United States warned Russia against intimidating Ukraine. Kiev has been locked in a conflict with Russian-backed separatists since 2014, and this week Ukrainian officials reported Russian troop movement in annexed Crimea and on the border, near territories controlled by Moscow-backed separatists. On Thursday, Zelensky's ministers discussed the escalating security situation with Western allies including U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin.